Before we begin, if this resonates, please like, subscribe, and share. It helps us grow the conversation and meet this epochal moment together, where something new is arising in humanity. Welcome to Portals of Perception and to Current Openings, what the world doesn't quite get yet. And today we are embarking on episode 29. My working title, looking up at my slide, is Grow and Wither on the Journey of Becoming Beyond the Binary, How Creational Logic Reveals the Invisible Third. And David, just before we turned the recording, you said, well, you have a tweak on beyond the binary. You are now in the embrace the binary and beyond.
Yes, I went from the binary and beyond to beyond the binary to now embracing the binary, because I realized the way into the reconciling principle, the way into that third vector, you don't get it by focusing on the positive, you get it by embracing both. So you're on a journey. Yeah, such an important feature. So I like embracing the binary. It's got a certain challenge with it, and at the same time, it's got a certain endearment with it too.
And you're coming to us today from somewhere in Mexico, and we are ready to embark on the discovery of today, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's slight change in surroundings around me today.
Well, so let me bring up the slide. So yeah, embrace the binary and the beyond to discover how creational logic reveals the invisible third, with a focus today on the processes of growing and withering, and how actually both are necessary and integral to the process of life. Just before coming on this exploration today, I went for my morning little jog and walk in the forest nearby. I look down at the forest floor and I think the forest is dying because it's all rotting. But then I look up and I see the green of the trees and it's vibrantly growing. So the truth is the forest is both growing and withering and decaying.
Yes.
And actually both are needed in the process of life. So I thought we should start today by once again deepening in why are we focusing on creational logic. And let me offer a starter and then invite that you make some additional comments to this, and then it will lead us into this exploration into growing and withering. So we found our way into creational logic actually through the idea that it offers first-hand way, first-hand method to validate and confirm knowledge, to verify truth. When we did in episodes 22 and 23, the journey into the integrated natural verification system of life, the fivefold verification system of life. And that first of the five elements was the journey into creational logic. So we brought that as a way to overcome the trap of only relying on second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand derivative reports, so to speak, about truth, and as a way to where each one of us, having given a human model, human machinery, may be able to access directly the knowledge and the truth available inside the process of life. So that's the way we came into it. We, in a way, came into it through the back door or the side door. But when we launched this series of conversations into creational logic, what we said was there is a bigger thing there, which is that it affords us a way, so that would be the second reason, it affords us a way to boost, to uplift everything that we do in life. Because creational logic is decipherable inside the even bigger context of the logos, and the logos as the formative intelligence of life has an interior logic, which is what we're calling creational logic, and actually by working to decipher and decode the creational logic in the phenomenology of life all around us and through our experience, what we do, we attune to this, the logos, the flow of life, and that is not learning what somebody else said, and that is also not an abstract spirituality. It's an applied vitality of directly engaging with the aliveness of the experience of life. So that was the second reason. The third reason has always been in the background, and we talked about in many different conversations here in Portals, but we didn't necessarily in the last few brought this directly in the context of our work into creational logic, which is the series of crises that we are experiencing all around us now, the global challenges and the difficult crises. If we went one by one, we could either directly trace or at least point to how they are exacerbated and accelerated because of humanity's disconnection and distance from creational logic, from the logos. The meaning crisis and the collapse of shared meaning structures that held, at least in traditional societies, and again, this is not us advertising going back to 15 or 1600s before the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and all that happened there, but we are suggesting that there is something that occurred as a result of the journey we've been on, and part of it is we're experiencing a meaning crisis and the collapse of meaning structure. The byproduct of that is a profound mental health crisis, and that is accompanied by an epidemic of loneliness and epidemic of polarization, and couple that with the cascading global failure points, all sorts of failure points all over the world, without any coherent structure to address these. So, without mentioning the accelerated ecological degradation and so on and so forth, you can do the list I'm proposing. And on different occasions in the context of the work into the soul, we've done so. We could put a magnifying glass one after another, and we will see that in each one of those we can trace humanity's separation and distancing from natural laws, from creational logic, from the flow of the logos, to be, if not the very cause of the crisis, a major factor. So there is a premise here which says that by engaging with this work, we're at least drawing closer to the place, to the source, to the ground where we may be able to find remedy to those difficult and challenging struggles. So I'd offer that as a beginning answer to why we're focusing on creational logic. It's a way to trace and validate truth. It's a way to uplift everything we do, our resilience, our well-being, our intactness, our capacity as leaders in any circumstance. And thirdly, it's a way to address, not in an obvious way, in a subtle way, the predicaments of the human condition. What would you build on this or offer by way of additional perspective to this question?
Thanks, Aviv. Yeah, I would say that it's a way of bringing us closer to creation.
Okay.
That creation presents us with what we need to be closer to source. We get the idea of source and resource. We talk about having resources. Like yourself, I went for a walk. I'm in a different ecology right now, so I was in Mexico and noting how many flowers were very dramatically demonstrating a 5-pointed star, dramatically demonstrating a pentagram, and how in many, many different locations, I find that from the core, when slicing an apple to reveal what's inside an apple, to what's demonstrated in plant life, particularly in flowering, how the number 5 and the symbol of 5 is so predominant or abundant in nature. It's all around here. And creation is offering ways, means, the evidence is all around us as to the shapes, the colors, the numbers, the natures of creation, in a way demonstrating creation language. It made me think again how back in the time of Plato, going back a long ways, it was said that you could only enter Plato's school after you'd spent a year studying sacred geometry. And how interesting is that? Before that was a conditioning. The conditioning wasn't from another human being. It wasn't from a teacher. It was to go out into nature and look at the patterns and shapes that creation offers directly, and tune oneself in to what I would call then permanent truth based in the primary language of creation, which is number, shape, and color. We then put words to it or language to it, which in a way that's descriptive value. But those original signals, that's right there in what could be seen the logos, the signs and symbols of the logos. And for us as humans, we would call that logic, to be able to pick up on those signs and symbols, take those resources and connect them back to source, which then, as you said, brings well-being, brings health, gives us a sense of knowing that we belong, because I can look at that 5-pointed flower and I can think, well, hey, am I not a 5-pointed flower? 2 arms, 2 legs and a head. I'm walking around like a human starfish. And whenever I see other people, you go, hey, give me 5. You never say, give me 6 or give me 7. It's always, we're walking, talking, breathing number 5. And it would seem that the planet we live on, in addition to being binary, she loves the number 5. She loves a 5-aspected thing. And that, to me, is creation logic right there.
That's beautiful, David. Thank you. So when one internalizes in a deeper sense what you're offering, that this is about discovering a way to connect with and get closer to creation, so we know that we belong. What it evokes for me is that the deeper mystery of connecting to creational logic and the logos is that it is not about what I or you may be able to say. It truly is about arranging ourselves to receive, which is that message. If you want to join Plato's school, spend a year receiving the signs of creation in nature. So this for me is important. We're going to explore today several examples and expressions and facets of how growing and withering are 2 processes that are central to creational logic. And before we do that, the realization and the insight is it's even not about what we say, it's beyond it. It's how those, each example, each facet represent a coded marker of how we can arrange our lives to better receive. So if there is work to be done here, it's the work to arrange ourselves to receive. Now that's an interesting notion because you'd say, well, what's the big deal? Typically, you'd need to work in order to give something, but as we often said, there is a reversal that takes place, and in a minute we will attend to another reversal. There is a reversal that takes place when we go from the exoteric to the esoteric, and in this case, I'm suggesting that anything we talk about by way of um, describing the expression of creational logic is in some way already a second principle. In that the first principle is actually the attunement, the alignment, the capacity to receive, and therefore become a vessel, conscious vessel, because as you said, we already are a vessel. You are a five-pointed human star. Well, what happens when that fact is coupled with conscious witnessing, participative, and mindful notation that we are that kind of a creation, creational expression that is five-pointed star. So out of that, as I ask us to also then address the second question, which is, okay, so why are we focusing on creational logic? We gave some reasoning, we gave some logic there. Within the focus on creational logic, why are we placing such a strong emphasis on dualities and polarities? And you already given one answer to that. Is there anything else you'd say to the second question and its combination with the first?
I would say it's the most fundamental and probably one of the first experiences we have of becoming conscious with our senses. Like, I bang on this table in front of me. It's a kind of marble table and it's hard. And I touch, say, this hair, and it's so-called soft. And we discover we're in a place where for every action, as Newton famously said, for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. Or I like to say it, for every creation, you change the letters around, for every creation, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's the same letters in a slightly different order with reactive and creative. So it's the most fundamental evidence of creation logic. Then we get into, as I just mentioned, the aspect of five, or the aspect of four seasons, or the spectrum. So there's many other examples of universal laws which demonstrate creation logic. But the most fundamental, the place to begin, the easiest place to begin, is with that which is most evident to our senses, which is this emphasis on dualities or polarities, because we're never in a singular place of one polarity. There's always, we might want to favor grow. We might be like, oh, I really want to be on the grow side of things, but we need to be in both grow and wither, as we will see, because you cannot have one without the other. I mean, just briefly, imagine if your skin cells only ever grew and never withered. Thankfully, every 28 days, skin cells are leaving us according to the cycle of the moon, that 28-day cycle. But if they just kept growing and growing and growing, wow, what would we look like by the time we were 10 years old? It's hard to imagine what we would even be like, because they would not have the opportunity to, they would not be the withering or the departing or the shedding process.
Right, indeed. And the way I will build on this is that, well, again, why are we focusing on creational logic? So we can become better agents of the creational process, which is what happens when we draw closer to creation. Well, how can we become better agents of the creative and the creational process? by working in alignment and attunement to the nature of that process. And what the nature of that process tends to reveal here in this planetary theater is first polarities and duality. And if we don't do the work to become conscious of those, then what happens is that those polarities, those dualities, they play us instead of us managing them. So the invitation here is by working to bring consciousness, to become mindful, becoming mindful of those dynamics, the polar dynamics, we actually are using those dynamics to liberate life rather than to be captured by the polarization potency. And it's a way where we get to express the brief of as above, so below, and we get to apply man is made in the image of God, and if you therefore want to study the universe, study man, and if you want to study man, well, study the stars and the universe. So all that is part of what we are inviting by the study. And what we also said was who seek to find a non-dual state, a non-dual experience, which is strange because non-dual itself is a framing that is dualistic in nature. The moment you say non-dual, you say, well, there is a dual and there is non-dual, and what is there if not a duality, right? Yeah. The path we are offering in studying polarity through and inside the context of creational logic is we're saying, well, actually, the more you study those dynamics, the greater the liberation and the capacity, as you said in the beginning, to embrace these powers and therefore integrate, transcend, release, and get those dynamics to work in support of your journey, in support of your development, in support of what you want to serve, rather than try to run away from those. Because running away, well, you can't run away from polarity on this planet. So that's the way I would frame that, and it's that which leads us today to do a bit of a recontexting and building what we've done in our last episode, in episode, well, 27 and 28. Yep. Because when we landed 28, you said, we mostly addressed it inside an exoteric framing because we described, well, I'll bring it up, we described mostly the red shift and blue shift in the sense of a galaxy moving away, therefore light waves are stretching. Yes. And blue shift in the sense of a celestial body moving closer, and therefore the light waves are compressing. And although we took it then to a developmental context, you said, well, really we ought to bring the next several dimensions of red shift and blue shift. And this is where they present a reversal. And I said, that's perfectly all right. It's like the reversal we experience in the context of other key ideas in life. For example, we discussed that love in the exoteric context is doing what you most feel like doing. That's you going with what you love to do. And if you love to now have a chocolate ice cream, that's what you do because you follow that love and passion in the moment. But what we suggested there, that when you take love through the exoteric, mesoteric into esoteric, we discover that love is often doing the thing you least want to do because you love it so much. So right there is a reversal that occurs. And I gave another example, which was that when you're working to scale a business, you will work to find a way to do the least amount of work necessary to produce the critical outcomes you want to create. Otherwise, you can't scale. When you do this work we're doing here, it goes through a reversal. Instead of doing the least amount of work, you will do the unnecessary work, because actually this idea of connecting and receiving the creational flow, the creational logos, is about getting it not just through your brains. That's why I said it's not about us being able to talk in a smart way. It actually is about bringing the infusion, the influx, the inflow of that creational process down, down to every cell in my little toe. So, so that's why there is a reversal from doing the least amount of work to doing the unnecessary work. So here, let me populate a slide with everything I have, and I'm going to let you play with that. So, well, so a mesoteric way of looking at this will completely reverse the appreciation of red and blue, because it will look at the human system and it will appreciate soft and hard, where there are two octaves of the human system. The above, that part, is hard on the outside and soft inside. That part is soft on the outside and hard on the inside. And then you suggested also that we've got to bring past and future into it. So let me actually pause here and let you build on this appreciation of red and blue, and then we'll bring a couple of more dimensions into this. Just so we, again, why? Because we wanted to do more with less rather than less with more, which, as you said, is the way to go for power.
And picking up on something you said earlier first, about the language that we use has many clues in it. Like our language has been developed, all languages, over many thousands of years, and there's clues as to the logic of the universe in the language. So when we look at the idea of collecting, so it's not enough to just go, oh yes, I've got one. I understand polarities. Oh yeah, I got that, hard and soft. Okay, I can move on now. Because what that does is it only collects one example, and one example will give a certain amount of power. But if you can collect 1,000 examples and then build into certain selective examples, you start to go from collecting to connecting. Again, the clues in the language, and then you're able to become correct. You go from collect to connect to correct, and it's right there built into the language itself. So when it comes to the logic of creation, it presents itself, and then we add descriptive language to it. So there's a truth in the fact that we are, as you just said, to reiterate, we are in our bodies soft on the outside, and we've got a skeleton structure on the inside, but somehow above the neck, we change octave. And that's not, I'm not inventing that, you're not inventing that. 8.2 billion humans present the evidence that that is the case. So it becomes becomes infallible. It's like infallible argument. It becomes infallible logic. And to me, that's the crux. The logos demonstrates the laws in a throughout way. So we look to find those laws, and it works by a logic. So when it comes to the idea of past and future, what I register is there's a government. I look at the red, in a way, the redshift bringing things to compression. And mostly, let's take human experience, mostly people live their life now, today, according to their past experience. It brings them to a certain point, and then that past experience, different when a child is 1 year, 2 years old, but particularly as we grow and develop, it brings us to a certain point, and then we tend to act within the governance of what we already know. Now, if we're able to go expansive into the future is actually unknown. We tend to make it known from our previous experience, and we put that upon the future. But if we're able to be, and I'm sure we'll get there in terms of this third place, if in the moment we're able to not be entirely dominated by the identity that's been formed by our past, but actually kind of face up to the unknown of the future, it opens up like that blue expansion. It opens up expansive opportunity, possibility. We start to look at an opening future rather than, oh, it's going to be more of the same. Also, I think Shakespeare said it's something like, yesterday will be the same as today, and tomorrow will be the same as today as we trudge our weary way toward the exit. I changed it slightly, but it was kind of, that was the crux of it. Whereas if we're not fully governed by the past, but we're able to be expansive, which to me is going from more red inclined to blue inclined, kind of going like this to whoosh like this. That's the change of octave point. We could almost see it with the body. There's a change of octave from hard on the outside to soft on the inside, crossing over into a different octave where it becomes from more, let's say, red, compressed, into more blue, expansive. So by analogy, really.
Indeed, and the way you're using here red and blue is different now from the spectrum of wavelength and more attuned to the nature of what these colors represents. Also, when we bring the idea of subtle presences, and certainly when we refer to the ultimate transition. So in this case, you are inviting us to feel our way into blue as something that's soft, that's open-ended, hence the future, that by subtle presence has more of a cold nature, right? And therefore its function is to accompany and facilitate fine things that lives inside a cooler, fine presences that live inside cooler ecologies, where red represents something that's harder, that's compressing, and that tends to get hot. And of course, as we already said in the previous episode, we need both. We need the red energy and the blue energy. We need the red shifting nature and the blue shifting nature. We need the soft and the hard, the hot and the cold. And we even suggested that there is a white vector that comes in between that is able to envelop and contain both. And the one more element to add here is this sense of arrival and departure, birthing and dying. And there is a different way to look perhaps at redshift and blueshift. You can look at it from both sides. But anything else you'd say on this? Again, what I intended to do with this slide was to take it from one dimension of redshift and blueshift and open the contemplation beyond it without trying to answer all the questions. When a question is presented and we try to answer it and close it, we are in a redshift process. When a question is, an inquiry is presented and we open it with greater range of possibility without seeking to close it, which is what we're trained to do in school. There is a question, let's answer it. No, we actually want to open it further because that's how you move from collecting to connecting. We engage a blue shift process in our exploration. So what else would you say to?
Even if we go back to the exoteric and we look at the diagram there on the right of the red shift and the blue shift, we can only witness that diagram, and someone could only make that diagram, and someone could only make that observation if they're not locked into one or the other, even at the exoteric level, because it takes a third intelligence to go, oh, that thing's doing this and that thing's doing that, which means there's something observing which is not locked into either, is able to actually observe both and make that slide of both. So we can easily, we've referred to this as the binary trap. We can get locked into being hard or get locked into being soft. But our third position indicates that we're not actually attached to one or the other. So you said this, we're not attached to only being the octave above the neck, and we're not only attached to being the octave below the neck. We're actually an embodiment of both. And so to be a bother, interesting, that's the word bother. Why should I bother? Well, why should I be a bother? Why isn't it easier just to stick with an answer of convenience and just get one answer and just stick with that through the whole of life? No, it's working out something to collect, to connect, to move into over time, getting it correct, not in terms of getting it right, but being on the journey of getting closer to the truth, fastening onto the journey the truth gives us, which means truth is a ladder going somewhere, so we're able to keep elevating.
Anything you'd say to this realization that different energetic natures and frequencies, they come along a whole spectrum that ranges from hot to cold, from coarse to fine, and that we are differentiating here a bit of a flavor, a bit of that nature of red and blue. This is not to say that there aren't very fine reds, but that red has in the spectrum a different function. Anything you'd say to that?
Again, that need to be able to measure both. It puts me in mind of another example, which is when you get a so-called pH strip for measuring the acid and the alkali. You know, if it's more acid, it turns up red. It's a fascinating logic fact. If it's more alkali, it turns up blue. But when it's at the balance point, it's white. And the balance point in the white then gives you the ability to add a bit of extra acid to go red or add a bit of extra alkali to go blue. But the white is the balance point. So the functionality of harder potentially being more on the red incline, softer being a bit more on the blue incline. But again, curiously, you go too blue and you'll get what's called an alkali burn.
Mm.
Go too red and you'll get an acid burn. You'll burn on either end. If you try and go with one to an extreme, either whether you go blue or you go red, either way you get burnt. so that ability to be in the middle and go, oh, I don't only want to go right, I also want to be able to go left. If I can only go right, I'll end up going round and round in circles one way. If I can only go left, I'll go round and round in circles the other way. So I want to be able to proceed embracing the binary, working with both.
Indeed. So any way we look at it, from any angle we approach it, life seems to be that third invisible element that proceeds by integrating the two, which brings me to where we started the exploration into polarity, where we worked on yes and no rather than or no. And we said that there is here a mystery in that it also says yes and no, and it also says that there is a DNA in between those in the capacity to hold both. So today we want to go deeper on growing with them and explore the polarity dance on the journey of becoming. And I already suggested that as I did my morning walk in the forest, I realized the forest was both growing and withering. So what we are saying here is the very point you just made. These are not opposites. They are not opposites. They do appear as polarity in the experiential dimension of life, but they're actually both in support of the process of life. And as you said, if we only grew skin cells, where would we be? What would we look like by the age of 10? So there is something that is our body and the natural processes of life, what they teach us is they teach us that emergence and reemergence must be facilitated by release and by letting go. Now, what else would you speak to and build about this idea of growing wither?
Looking at it in relation, as you have in the slide there, to yes and no, um, it's so clearly a helix. Like as you said, they're going like this. They're crossing and they cross each other across a third invisible. Where the helix crosses, there's always a crossing point where something else happens. So, um, so they dance together. It's almost like having a dance partner. If it went grow, 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 it would be like saying yes, 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 yes. It's always yes. And then there would never be any shedding. And so even if in terms of going from the skin to going to our mental process, imagine if a person never had dreams in which they released energies. This is in the higher octave of the head. But if a person could never release their worries, if they could never say no and shed their worries, if their worries would never wither, what would we be like by the age of 20? We'd be praying for nightmares to release things from our brain, because that's part of the release process, that we want to be able to clear things out or shed things. And this would take us clearly into functionality of the mind-brain system, but the idea of dreams as part of what we're actually shedding and releasing. So we have experience during the day. Our eyes are constantly saying yes. I think it's an amazing feature of our eyes. They say E, yes. The moment we look at something, we said yes to it because it's come into our brain. We only go, oh, I don't want to see that. No, I don't want to see that. I'm looking away. Well, it's already in there. So at night, when we go to sleep, then according to what we've told ourselves we want to retain or release, then we can actually then shed those things. But if we could not shed them, if we couldn't say no, if we didn't have the ability to have electrical processes wither and memories wither. I mean, imagine if a person still felt the pain of their first breakup from when they were, let's say, 16, and it's still with them at the same intensity when they're 45.
Some people do.
Yes,
Some people choose. Some people choose to uphold these memories and replay them, and rather than actually shed and release. Yeah.
yeah, and then that makes a problem. It makes it causes the past to dominate. It causes the person potentially to say no. This is where we get into psychology, of course, which is not creation logic, it's psyche logic. But the person, because they've had a difficult experience when they're 16, they avoid relationships until they're 70,
Yeah.
because they're dominated by their past.
Well, so the reason I interjected there is because what you're painting invites us to realize that there are different kinds of growing within. Okay, there are those that are automatic, say the shedding the cells, the skin cells that are no longer functional and have decayed. And so that's an automatic example of withering. And then there are those kind of growing wither that's based on our intention, our choice and our intention. So let's just look at both the automatic and the chosen, and also the case in between, which is both has an automatic dimension and a bit of a chosen dimension. So I say that because I've recently observed when my grandson went through the phase where he stopped nursing, which is, so this was has an automatic dimension in the design of the biology of the growing child and in relationship with the mother, and yet they both participated in the transitional phase with certainly her with intention. So something very curious happened because that part of him that was still breastfeeding. It's a life. And once that process was, once he was going through the weaning phase, and that process, that part of him was withering, he, within days, was birthing a new self, a new behavior, more confident, more outgoing, more mischievous, more entrepreneurial. And I said, wow, that's just so interesting that there is a whole interior configuration, interior cosmology that is now withering and something else is coming online. That told me that this process is happening all the time in many different ways and levels. And we grow in with her physically, we grow in with her mental processes, emotional processes, as you said, memories. We grow in with her in certainly in our physical muscles and also in our resilience and all the capacities we choose to build. One of the ways I can see withering is, as you said earlier, things that used to bother me no longer bother me. So those preoccupations, those worries, those concerns, they have withered in my system as I gave rise to new concerns and new things that I care about. So this is going on all the time at all these levels. There are self-chosen dimensions, there are automatic dimensions. This blueprint of growing and withering is playing out all the time. And on the two sides of grow and wither are birth and death. So birth is the beginning of appearing into this octave of life. Death is the conclusion of a withering process. What comes up for you when you look now at this? You talked about previously double helix. I added one more dimension. What would you say to that?
Well, as you know, Aviv, I study and have for years the descriptive value of words and clues that they present, because I believe words, they contain many clues, because they're more than the age of reason lost this, because the age of reason stripped them back down to being referenced. But prior to that, each letter was known to have some kind of property, an energy property. And when you were talking about weaning, it dawned on me, wow, on the one side of the weaning process, you've got something that wanes, W-A-N-E, it wanes. But on the other side of the weaning process, you've got anew, something begins anew, A-N-E-W. Same letters, anew, wane, wean. Almost like weaning is the third principle. So we continue in a weaning process if we're with development over time. It's almost like that's that third invisible part. So with birth and death, it isn't that we only want to favor birth and death becomes unpopular, which tends to be the way of it. I think I've told the story before, but where when I was in Canada, at the early days in Mississauga, Canada, when there was a new birth in a house, they put a great big pink flamingo on the lawn, and it would say like "Born baby Betty, 8 pounds." But I never saw a house with a great big reaper outside with "Died Grandpa Ben, 185 pounds." There was very very much the favoring of the birth and like, let's push death over here. And the wisdom of creation logic is to realize that we are in between people. We are, as we said before, people of the cusp. We're in between people. We have things that we may want to die in us. If we're only going to shop at the shop of life or birth, we're only going to be birthing things. Well, that would mean, let's say when I was 13, if you'd asked me what I wanted to be, I might have said, oh, I want to play cricket. That was, I was big into playing cricket. And sort of everything that went with that, practicing for hours, making a ball with a piece of elastic through it, throwing it against the wall, hitting it. So I was big into that. But if I hadn't let that die in me, if I wasn't weaned off that, well, that would still be my life now. and it had its timing, and then it was time to let it die, to let it go, to let it wither. So it's so important is that, and and that we live in the interim. So many great philosophers have recommended think about death on a regular basis. Buddha said it. In the Freemasonry tradition, they gather around in a circle and they actually contemplate a skull to remind themselves about death. There'd be that what was it called, memento mori, reminder of death, because we need to realize that we're in both. We could then go with it's the place of being entranced as we come through the entrance and then we head toward the exit. So we need to embrace both. So we don't go, I specialize in birth. Well, then it's going to be unfortunate, because at some point death will come and find you, and you may not have thought about it.
And death, whatever way we choose to look at it, death is the completion of something. And in the completion, there is a space making for something new to emerge. We arrive here through the birthing, through the birth canal and through the process of birth. And then as we go through life, we experience many small moments of death. I mean, every night we go to sleep, we are experiencing we're practicing a small little death for the day. You can say every night we rehearse the transition of death, at least death for the day. So there is here an invitation to embrace this in its multi-dimensional way. Because just for example, every time we have a new idea, every time we start a new endeavor, every time we start a new relationship, potentially every time we begin a new conversation, there is at least a potential of that to be a birthing point, although sometimes it contains both a birth and a death. So there is a way of experiencing birth and death, not just on the two ends of life, but through the every moment and every hour, and certainly every day of our life. And it is with that that I'd like to bring this one more dimension: appear and disappear. And just as we inhale and exhale, as we just explored in the idea of birth and death, there is forever the appearance and the disappearance. Every moment appears, like this moment right now appears now, and it disappears as I continue the paragraph and listen to my thoughts and listen to what you're saying then after that. So we're living forever in between the appearance and the disappearance. And there is tremendous freedom and liberation in that.
If we go from the personal to the planetary, this is a theater of appearance, planet Earth, but it's also a theater of disappearance. And I mean, science tells us, I think it's the numbers differ, but about 97% of the species of organic life that have lived on the planet have become extinct. And so disappearance is natural to the planet. And the planet is not trying to keep something alive that is no longer part of the planet's organic life requirement, in a way, if we looked at it that way. And the planet is very, very comfortable with things appearing and disappearing, a new species being born and old species dying off. And that's part of this theater of appearance and disappearance. Again, we tend to favor one more than the other, but it's again embracing both, being able to embrace both. It strikes me when you spoke about coming through the birth canal, just briefly, that we don't talk much about going through the death canal.
Mm.
But when people speak about going up the white tunnel at the moment of death, most people who had so-called near-death experiences have the experience of going up a white tunnel or a white funnel, Well, isn't that a little bit like going up the death canal? We come in through one birth canal, we're going out through a death canal. It's an idea of the compensation of the two, but one is appearing into the physical, so we're appearing into the physical, and then we're disappearing from the physical into the electrical. So where were we 100 years ago? We hadn't yet appeared in planetary form. Where will we be in 100 years' time? Well, we'll no longer be in planetary form. We will have disappeared from planetary form, but maybe electrically, hopefully, we've moved on into a birth. We disappear from here and we appear somewhere else. We're to die here, to die from our physical body, to shuffle off the mortal coil, as they say. We then are born into a new octave, born into the next level of birth.
Right, right. So death in one dimension is birth into a whole other new dimension, and the disappearance from one octave could be an appearance in another octave. It depends what are the properties that have been configured, and that determines as to where these properties could reappear. Because one thing we do understand from our friend Einstein, energy um, cannot be eliminated. It changes form, and therefore it moves through a cycle of appearance and disappearance. And you went from the personal to the planetary. We could also go to see the appearance and disappearance in the galaxy and the universe at large, because what is a supernova if not a point where something reached a certain culmination and it brightens the night sky, but then that is a celestial formation that then dissipates and breaks down and actually facilitate the appearance of new formations. So the cycle of appearance and disappearance works all the way through to the galactic and the cosmos at large through the story, certainly of supernovas. Now, it is curious to come back to the planet because you have different planetary forms that are going through cycles of appearance and disappearance. You have seeds in the desert that are hidden for sometimes years and years and years until the rain comes, and then they bloom, maybe after they haven't been seen for 5 or 7 or 12 years. And you have the cicadas, if I'm pronouncing the English word correctly. That's how you.
The sequoia. I think you mean the tree, the sequoia.
No, I'm talking about the cicadas. They get underground sometime for 7 or 13 or 17 years until the adult come out again, and they die then within weeks. So in this case, the life cycle we see both in plant life and in the animal kingdom. Sometime we'll go through cycles of appearance and disappearance that are not in just a cyclical equation of a year, where there isn't a symmetry. There are various life forms that could disappear for a long time and then appear in a whole new way. The other place for me that's fascinating to consider appear and disappear is business. We've seen great companies appear, and they were on the Dow Jones index, and everybody would think, well, nothing can ever happen to this company. They've been the most successful company for several decades, and then they disappear. General Electric was one of the recent examples, right? It's a great company and largely disappeared. So there is something about that in business. We see this in art and in culture and in fashion, where we see trends of an avant-garde new form of art that's taking over all the galleries, and those trends are then being processed and absorbed, and they're replaced by new trends. So we see appearance and disappearance certainly in all these realms, and we also see this in the interior realms, because we see processes in ourselves that we used to be very preoccupied by, and we're the center of our attention. And one day, as Sarah, my wife, likes to say, well, the soda water no longer has soda. So that means that you're no longer bothered by it, never bubble up in you again in quite the same way, which is a good thing because you have likely now been finding the aliveness of what bubbles up in you in a whole new context, into a whole new universe of possibility. So appear and disappear plays out in all levels of life. And I want to just bring one more similar expression and let you play with both. You mentioned that. And the enter and exit is like a slice in the larger cycle of birth and death and appear and disappear. What comes up for you when you look at this cosmology that we're building here?
Well, when something makes an entrance, it has to come from somewhere. Something's making an entrance on the planet. I can always think of it like a bar where our vision extends to a certain distance and we go, oh, it's made an entrance, oh, it's making an exit. But if we could if we could see where it's coming from and where it's going, that bar would have continuance from before something makes the entrance into after it makes the exit. Like if we think of a stage, a theater of appearance, and an actor comes on the stage from the wing, well, that actor's had a, whatever, 30-year life before they made their appearance. After they exit, they might live to be 70. They've got another 40 years of after their exit. So we see this little chunk and we go, oh, there's the entrance, oh, there's the exit. But we're only, we're kind of focusing in, which was actually more redshift from before, rather than whoosh, expanding out. And when we expand out, we realize kind of the miracle of the creation that we're in. Like if something's going to make an appearance on the planet, that energy had to exist somewhere. Taking what you said earlier about Einstein, this energy can't be created or destroyed. So if an elephant's going to appear on the planet, there had to be an elephant energy. If it's going to disappear, that energy goes somewhere. Every human life, all 8 billion of us, every individual life, their energy had a place it was before it came through the entrance of the planetary appearance, and it has a place to go after. So the enter and the exit, from our standpoint, are we're in that liminal space, to use the word you used a couple of episodes ago. That liminal space, which is where we're entered but not yet exited, and we're toward the exit but we haven't yet passed through it, and we're in the middle, we're in the interim, we're in the in between, neither yet, yeah, that says it well enough. We're in that liminal in between space.
Indeed. And when you enter a room full of people, you're entering a field of potential. You're stepping into a landscape of multiple possibilities when you're there in the room with other people. And the moment you exit that room, you leave that field of potential behind. You may carry memories, you may carry experiences, and also something in that room changed because you exited. So the entry and exit into theaters of possibility is part of the experience of life. Every day we enter a new theater of possibility. And if we are wise, we go through that day and we harvest. Well, first of all, we create more rather than less in terms of value, and then we harvest that value as part of that third invisible line of what supports life and what supports possibility. So something happens. And anytime you enter any new dynamic, we know the experience because we've all at some point or another had the experience, maybe earlier in life, when you were standing online, whether it was the soccer game or basketball game or any other game, you were standing online waiting for your turn or waiting for the opportunity to enter the game. And once you enter the game, it changed for you. And potentially, if you were lucky, you changed the game. So something came alive for you. So that is forever part of the story of life. We enter possibilities, we enter relationships, we enter conversations, we we enter new job opportunities, and we exit. And actually, seeing it in this context, that it's part of the continuum of life, makes for a much healthier, more robust way of going through experiences. Because otherwise, we don't recognize that this is the nature of life. If we fail to see that the small death and the small exits often give way and offer the permission to greater possibilities to arise, then we lock ourselves from, well, from the greater sunrise and sunset of life. So just entering this dimension again to show that there is a larger cycle, because the sunrise is not one moment and the sunset is not one moment. It's an elongated experience whereby something profound shifts. So please, what comes up for you when we now add the sunrise and the sunset? Again, we are looking at different facets of this theater of duality and the way it plays out in life. In this case, we call it the sunrise and the sunset, but it really is the planet's move of itself. And in this case, the experience of the polarity is generated by something other than ourselves that shapes our experience.
And we see it to be sunrise, and we see it to be sunset from our individual perspective. And the bigger planetary perspective, the fact of the both poles occurring at the same time, to the planet, it's a ring going around the planet. It's not sunrise. It's always sunrise or sunset somewhere. So we localize it to our own, again, we localize it to our own view and say, oh, this is sunrise, this is sunset. And that's our limited experience. But if we can expand our view, we'd actually see that if we moved fast enough, we could be in permanent sunrise around because it's always happening. And so part of the possibility of our development, like between enter and exit, is that we're able to be conscious of the fact that we're a small something inside a much bigger system. So our ego will tend to overprint that and say, well, I see everything from my point of view. And I think this was part of why Plato would have people go off and study sacred geometry for a year before being considered for admission, because it would shrink their ego. It's hard to think it's all about you when you realize that this whole system of duality at planetary level is persisting 24/7, and that we have our moment of appearance on the planet, we have our moment of disappearance, but we come from somewhere, we're going somewhere. When I saw that five-pointed, or those multiple five-pointed flowers today, there's an energy that goes with that symbol that's come from somewhere. And it's appearing by the billion, I would say, all over the planet, that representation of that five-pointed star. And so there's an energy that corresponds with that. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. So I think that sunrise and sunset is talking about something bigger, which is the relationship between our planet and the sun, and our lives occur within that relationship. So without that potency and power of the Father, in a way, the Father in heaven, the Son, then we would not be experiencing our theatre appearance on the planet. So even at that level, we're not really planetary citizens, we're citizens of the heliosphere.
Right.
citizens of this particular, or as a scientist recently said to me, it's more like a heliocone. We're part of this whole system inside of which we play a micro part.
So,
Um,
so this is where the deeper we go into this, the more we abide with this, the more we are making the invitation for the more than just the words and the examples, but the inner registration, the inner attunement. Because just for example, when one meditates on this idea that you offered, well, see that the sunrise and the sunset is a ring around the planet that's forever is in movement. One can embrace that imagery and that experience to the idea of entry and exit. So as I go through the day, I enter one domain and exit another, and then exit that domain and then enter another. And it's a bit like the sunrise ring moving across and around the planet because of the planet's rotation. So, and even more so, is there a way for me to contemplate birth and death with that sense that there is a ring that reaches a certain threshold? Because, see, where this really becomes exponential is, I'm going to go for a minute off script of what's on the, not there is a script here, but bring into it a whole other dimension, which is which is um, which is relevant, especially with enter and exit and with everything on the slide, which is the understanding, the early and the later understanding of quantum mechanics. When quantum mechanics appeared in the early parts of the 20th century, it solved some unexplained phenomenology for the physicists because essentially the equation solved certain anomalies. But then when they studied the equation, they discovered that the equation produced some results that were extraordinarily not intuitive at all. Because the formulas, the mathematical formulas of quantum mechanics brought this idea, well, that this small particle can move up, can move down, can move in different directions. So now they needed to abide with this idea of, well, so there are many universes in this place where we are, but that was totally unintuitive. And so that popularized the idea of the influence of the observer on the being observed, because what they then said, and that became the early interpretation of quantum mechanics, which was that what you looked at, and once you saw that particle moving down or moving up, entering or exiting, sun rising or sun setting, once you saw it to what it was, once you saw that it was a sunrise, then the universe collapsed from endless possibilities to the one that you saw, the one that you observed. But when that collapse version and interpretation of quantum mechanics became popularized, they realized that it created, at least some in the space of physics, some of them discovered that it makes no sense. It makes no sense because it creates other anomalies that are in conflict with the equation. So that's when the other interpretation of quantum mechanics built momentum, which is what was called the many worlds interpretation, essentially describing that, well, all these universes are available. And like right now, one way to feel your way into it, right now I'm listening to what I'm saying, and there are endless possibilities of how I'm going to end this paragraph and end this line. And all these universes exist, and actually I exist in the one that I'm experiencing right now, but I'm also existing in all these other universes, which is very difficult for our physicalist orientation to intuit because we see the physical material world as one continuum. But how is it relevant here is that the latest interpretation of quantum mechanics does indeed suggest that we are forever entering and exiting through many universes. And right now, you and I, we experience ourselves in one universe, but we are concurrently experiencing ourselves in many other universes. Now, this is not me offering a metaphysical woo-woo description of the universe. This is me almost quoting some of the leading people in physics describing how all those slices, all those universes, they coexist. And potentially we enter and exit one after the other. So for me, they of course didn't yet make the next leap, which is that the interior dimension of what they are actually describing is a plasma state of the soul of the universe, which is a way to describe the interior state of the universe in which all possibilities co-arise and coexist. And what led me there is the meditation you offered, see the sunrise as a ring that goes through motion all over the planet. And when I embrace that in the universal sense, I allow myself to travel through all the different slices and experience all the alternative ways I could be ending this paragraph. So, what would you do with that, please, David?
Well, it strikes me that in our sort of redshift approach to things, which science has that, is trying to understand, it's focus. And as long as we're focusing on understanding, we actually can't understand because we're trying to focus, which is redshift, into a blue shift expanding universe. Because the universe is expanding. It's said again by science like 100,000 miles every second or something. I lose the number, but it's an incredible number. So we're kind of going, I need to understand this. But meanwhile, the actual universe is going this way. So somehow we would need to bring our mental faculty, our emotion, into an open expansiveness where we would have an intuitive kind of feeling about it. And it's amazing because with one part of our faculty, we may get a creative kind of insight into something. And then another part, it's like, now, how do I prove that? How do I work it out? And so it said that about Einstein himself, that the relativity theory, as it was called, it downloaded in almost in seconds, but then it took him 10 years to do the math.
Right.
Right, but he had to do the math. And so there's this curious thing about logic doesn't necessarily work by focus. Like we
Well,
think of logic, like in universities, they talk about logic as if something like you've got your preposition, you've got your this, and it's very analytic. But maybe creation logic is not analytic, but we actually get a download intuitive understanding, and then it's like, oh, and now we need to do the math.
well, maybe creation logic is both analytic and integrative. But the power in what you offer there is really this is for me the PowerPoint of this conversation today, because what you landed there is an observation and appreciation that most of what we call understanding or getting to know something is when we made something alive dead, when we managed to kill it from a living process into something that we were able to put in a box and name it. And so much of the so-called academic learning is the process of deadening the flow of life. Oh, I killed that and I name it and now I know it and control it and I can understand it, rather than use everything that we encounter to open and open and open. Now, we say we need both to open and close, because if we don't close certain things, we can't open in other things. And the luxury of our conversation is we don't need to now run for our life, because if we were now under physical threat, we couldn't be having this mystical and practical exploration here. So yes, there are certain questions that are being closed to allow other questions to be opened up. And inside it, I will offer that this is an important realization. Do we, in the way we learn, do we, in the way we seek to understand, actually seek to kill the process of life, the aliveness of something, so that we can take control of it? Which leads me, because I want to bring just a few more, to renewal and decay. And you addressed that right in the beginning when you talked about skin cells. Let me bring now the other end of our anatomy and talk for a minute about the renewal and decay in the bones tissue, because bones are continually remodeling themselves practically by two specialized cell types. The osteoclasts are the cells that dissolve and reabsorb the old or micro-damaged bone. So there is one cell that forever breaks down the old tissue of the bone and remodel it and use it as part of the facilitation of the renewal of the bone. And there is the osteoblasts, which are those cells that lay down the fresh collagen and that matrix that they build and mineralize it. So the renewal, the decay and renewal and decay forever are underway in our bone structure. We need both for the skeleton to be robust, to be exactly right, to facilitate posture and movement. Too much decay, and the bone will lose its density and will suffer structural collapse. Too much renewal, and as you said earlier, it will become excessively rigid. It's like we will grow and grow and grow, and nothing will decay. So what are we seeing? We're seeing that to maintain the kind of dynamic equilibrium, we need the bones to experience both renewal and decay, decay and renewal. And where else do we see this? Well, here is one more arena where we see faster decay, and it is something I wanted to bring into it as well. This is a picture of the large 1988 fires in Yellowstone. About a third of the park was destroyed. And the experts said it will take 100 years for it to come back. And I remember when we traveled to Yellowstone, just maybe 9 years after that, the park was in full swing recovery. But you could still see the residue of the large fire. But what was occurring, and here is here is an example, a picture that shows the rapid recovery. So it's the same picture. You see, that's what it looked like in 1989 and Yep. what it looked like in 2011. So they thought it was going to take 100 years for the park to recover. In actuality, it recovered much faster. And maybe more importantly, which they didn't anticipate, it brought to life many, many species that were not seen in the park for a very long time, maybe centuries in that area. This is one more picture where you see flowers that are in full bloom in area that this picture was taken also a year after. So what are we seeing? We're seeing the decay, in this case, the decay and the destruction of extraordinary fire, extraordinary flames, unleashed the most extraordinary renewal in the park, the Yellowstone Park. So what would be the analogous for that in our own life? Where do we see renewal and decay in our life? What would you contribute to that?
Well, firstly, such a beautiful example of that resiliency and the comeback power of the planet. That we have that power also within us because we're universal beings on the planet and we can draw upon creation forces. So when we hit something in our life that seems to be calamitous or catastrophic, that there is this incredible ability to regrow from within the what's been caused by those fires. So this is part of creation logic, is that we're able to tune ourselves in to the powers of creation. And we can use creation logic to do that. So what you've just demonstrated, a person can meditate upon that in their own life and call those same powers toward themselves in micro, because clearly what's there for Yellowstone Park is too big for one human. But we can call in and call upon those powers and flowers of new growth in our own life. So yeah,
Well,
beautiful diagram picture.
latent in what you're offering in that meditation is we can choose to wither, we can choose to facilitate slow decay, or in special circumstance, we may be able to burn through a print or a habit or a behavior that we choose to absolve and dislodge in in seconds. And you shared on on an early episode an example of a person that shared with you a story, somebody who was working in the mines, and one day he noticed that he was working near explosives with, and he was lighting a cigarette,
Yep.
which was a habit he probably held for decades. And
Yep.
suddenly it dawned on him that he was smoking near explosives. And what in other circumstances would become very difficult habits to let go of, he just gave away in seconds. So that would be analogous to letting go, releasing, not in the slow process of decay, but burn through something in second, in this case, with the power of perception, with the power of connecting to creational logic. You could say he connected to creational logic in that moment in uncertain terms.
In a very rapid power. And what scared him the most was he'd lit the cigarette and he didn't even realize he'd done it. He
Right.
found himself with a lit cigarette with the dynamite. And he's like, how did I light this? And the shock just went right through him. Yeah.
Right. So what we're bringing forward in this meditation is there are those renewal and decay processes, again, automatically happening at the cellular level with the skin, with the bone, with every, in our bloodstream, everywhere. And there are those intentional, chosen behaviors, priorities, alignments, devotions, connections that we may choose to wither and or we may choose to birth, and they can happen rapidly or slowly, depending on the reason and depending therefore on the power we connect to, which brings me now to one more dimension here. We're building the meditation into nourish and starve. And what are all the many ways we can nourish something and we can also starve it? Well, we can choose to nourish something that's important for us that we care about in all sorts of, not just in one way. We can choose to nourish it directly, and we can choose to nourish the ecology in which it lives. And we can choose to starve whatever comes to take away from it. So this is more multifaceted than perhaps we would care to notice. What comes up for you when we add nourish and starve into this
That
cosmology?
we could take it through the five major fuels that every human being needs: physical, liquid, air, light, and direct energetic connection. So it ranges through this aspect of nourish and starve, and being able to work with both at the same time. We'll find this, I mean, hugely in the whole dynamic of nutrition and diet at physical level, at liquid level, air and breathing content, the idea of being able to actually have enough daylight and sunshine in a life, and then really the quintessence or fifth power, what we actually feed ourselves with directly, mentally, and emotionally. So these are really determiners of what we develop, what our character is going to become. What do we choose to nourish? What is it we choose to starve? What do we say yes to? What do we say no to? What do we cause to be born, and what do we cause to die? What do we cause to appear? What do we cause to disappear? These examples that you've given, they all start to talk to each other.
Indeed. So you offer the quintessence, the five natures of food and nourishment. And here is another way to build on this. So we can choose to nourish something by directly offering it sustenance, which means it's so that it won't die. Secondly, as I said, we can support the ecology in which it is growing. Thirdly, we can choose to starve what prevents it or what holds it back or what stifles it. Fourth, we can promote its possibility by creating growth opportunities. Another way to think about nourishing. When we are experiencing a new theater of opportunity, it's a form, it nourishes us with energy because the new opportunity inducts energy. Right there, there is nourishment. Fifth, we can cultivate adjacent spaces. I'm very interested when I see the most successful violin players that they also play the viola. Because somebody needs to play the viola when they play the double, the Mozart concertante piece for viola and violin. And somebody like famous old recording now of Zuckerman and Perlman. So Zuckerman is playing the viola, and Perlman is playing the violin. So here he decided to expand to the viola as well because of his nourished his possibility with more. So there are many ways to nourish a a passion, nourish a skill, nourish something you do. We can nourish by enriching what we do with specific qualities, with specific properties. So, and in the human case, we can nourish practically, physically, emotionally, intellectually. All those are on the nourishment side, and all those are also on the starving side because we can choose to deprive habits that are counterproductive for us. We can choose to deprive and win, as we said earlier, sources that we will no longer engage with because we choose to prioritize other connections. It's because I'm right here with you in this conversation, David, I am in this universe, to stay still with the quantum mechanics, not in conversation with 100 other people. So I choose to nourish this dynamic, the dynamic of current openings. And by doing so, in some way, I am already starving myself from other things. One of the most important behaviors I've found is how I choose to starve certain lives of me in the first 3 hours of every day so that I can more fully nourish other lives. I don't, unless I have a need to, I won't go and process the latest news because mostly I know that the latest news are old. They're not new at all, they're old. So I choose in the morning what I bring to focus because what I choose to focus on is what I nourish and what grows and what therefore appears with me such that I can sunrise into that space. This morning, this conversation was my focus, so I brought it to the center of my attention. And by doing so, by definition, I'm starving other lives. Now, they will get their due, they will get their time, they will get what they need later today, but I didn't want anything else to interfere in the focus of my attention and my consciousness. And that is a way to bring into the day-to-day rhythms of our lives the awareness that what we focus on, we nourish, and we bring to it the qualities of our life.
Yes. Beautiful.
That's
So,
why I think, yeah, with the emotion, and also with our emotional fuel, which is a crucial part, the devotion that you had in that, which is devoting on all the other things that you didn't do.
right.
I think of a devotee as someone who's devoted on many, many things to be devoted to something, possibly someone, whatever the case is, but they exclude. Well, it's not on the screen there, but it would be exclude to include, or we could say that what we will do is powered by what we will not do.
Well, and one example of it is one of the core practices in business and innovation. One of the pathways into innovation is to introduce constraints. You take away certain possibilities and you say to the innovation team, go and solve this problem now with those assets or those resources or those permission having been withdrawn. And they need to come up with new creative solutions. So there are ways to starve a dynamic in order to unlock its possibilities. So there are, on the other side, you'd have business leaders that would starve certain projects because they can't really kill the project, so they will starve the project, so the project will die by itself. So we can bring all those into our personal development and personal transformation and personal journey by asking ourselves, well, what is it we choose to starve? And what is it we choose to nourish and feed such that it can grow? That is ultimately the biggest, what you spoke about there in what you will have and therefore you will bring more of to your life, and what you won't have, which you will therefore starve. The realization underlying that meditation is, well, I'm actually not one. I'm many lives in one. So by definition, when I choose to nourish certain lives and not nourish others, I grow these lives and I allow these other lives to wither. Sometime I may have a reason to come back to those, but certain lives I may wither completely to the point that they disappear from relevance inside me. Right there is the interplay and the sensitive, attuned awareness to the many in one, which is different to suppressing. I don't want to know about those. No, I actually am mindful, and now I choose how would I treat those different lives in me with the awareness of those many different facets of grow and wither. Because what we are calling this conversation is grow and wither on the journey of becoming. Which brings me to the last maybe expression here. What we nourish, we strengthen. What we starve, we weaken. And the realization that strength and weakness, they can coexist near each other. And in other words, weakness needs strength and will lead to strength a lot of the time. And strength will often contain weakness. We've seen, but the obvious example is the oak tree is very strong, but it can snap and be broken with a storm. The willow tree or the bamboo is flexible and it will bend in the storm and therefore will not be broken. What would you build and bring to this as we draw to conclusion about strength, strengthening, and weakening?
I have a strange analogy. It caught me this week. I was looking at a walnut, And like I like to look at the natural templates. It's part of creation logic is look at the patterns in things, like even cut a banana and look at the symbol in the middle. Look at what's inside what exists to see the sacred geometry within it. So I opened up a walnut, and it looks so much like a brain seen from above. You've got the left hemisphere, you've got the right hemisphere. But here's the curio. The new life doesn't grow out from either of the hemispheres. It grows out from a third place. It draws upon the power of both to grow. The new little shoot that comes up actually comes up from the back end of between the two hemispheres. So it doesn't come out of either. It works with both the hemispheres to come out of an unexpected third place. And I thought, wow, that's creation logic right there. There's something to learn in that about not only in the walnut, but how we use our nut. And we can work with what's strengthening and weakening, nourishing and starving, renewing and decaying simultaneously in our, as you just said, in our journey of becoming. That third shoot coming out from the walnut, I'd say, oh, that's what it's becoming. It's not becoming out of either of those two. It's coming out of the third thing.
We've now discovered in recent decades that even the mid-20th century approach to leadership, leadership by strength, often masculine in nature, is insufficient. We discovered that leaders are more effective when they bring the transparency of their humanity and showing that to better connect with their people. We see that genuine humility is not an act. Genuine humility is based in, oh, as you said earlier, I am a small thing inside a much bigger thing, and there are permissions and limitations within which I can operate as a human life because of the permissions of the human model. I can't flap my arms and fly like a bird. And so there is that humility with the design, humility within the human situation that is actually ready to integrate the confidence and the stature and the pride of what being human is. So those are actually living together, the strength and the weakness. And yeah, a wise man once said, if you don't let other people help you, you'll never have friends, right? Which is another way to say, if you didn't reveal some of your weaknesses, you won't benefit from the strength and the brilliance and the creative capacity of all the people around you. For me, the example is this project, this Portals project, because the more this specific current openings journey that the two of us are on together, the more we play in these explorations, the more I discover that there is greater unlock in the dialogue than whatever one person can get to on their own. So I am drawing to the end of this, and I wanted to bring the last three spaces to leave them undefined, to invite those that stayed with us nearly 2 hours to see what will you populate as other expressions of growing with it. And yeah, what where would you take this meditation? Because the more we attune to all of these different expressions of growing with there, the more we bring these dynamics to play, the more we unlock the uplifting power that's latent there, and the more we are able to then not just attune to creational logic and to the creation itself, we can become that tree of knowledge. We can become that tree of life as it emerges through our formation. These would be my closing words. What would you offer as a closing comment?
I think to leave those last three boxes open is exactly the right place to not even to land, but to carry on into continuance. Like each current openings, it has an entry and an exit, but it has a what was before and a what comes after. And you move on into the next theater of appearance, as do I, and then we're able to, universe allowing, I like to say, come into a further current openings expression. And so it's an ongoer. It continues on. Maybe that's another word for come between coming and going, is like the continuance. The ability to continue is such a gift, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I will carry from today is the fact that we can always, every moment, be sun rising somewhere. As the ring of sunrise carries around our planet, so can we travel with that sunrise. So as we sunset this conversation, those of you that stayed with us in a dedicated way all through to the end, where will you sunrise next in your journey? Where will you facilitate what you choose to nourish and what perhaps you choose to starve, so that you can grow in those areas that you decided you're now ready to grow into? That's the invitation. And thank you, David, for embarking on this journey with me.
Thank you, Aviv. The journey of becoming.
The journey of becoming.
Good. Bye now.
Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.